I'm down at the 5th Annual Safeguarding Children Conference in London today, where Director of Children's Services and council safeguarding groups from all over the country have met up to talk about child protection issues. An issue which hits the headlines regularly is the safety of children online, from children being bullied over social networking sites like Facebook and Bebo, to disturbing cases of paedophiles using the net to groom children. I'm here today with two experts to talk about how local authorities can help schools and parents keep children safe when they're on the computer and pick up the warning signs early. Here with me is Terry Jones, Independent Child Protection Consultant at IPTAC, which is the Internet Paedophilia Training Awareness Consultancy. Also joining us is Colin McKeown, Director at eSafe Education. So Terry, you spent over 30 years with Manchester Police in their Abusive Images Unit before becoming a consultant for IPTAC. Tell us a little bit about what you do and the issues you're coming across in your work.
Well, what I did was obviously in the police, and it was to do with associating images, inappropriate, indecent images of children to children at risk and to those who want to endanger children. Now I primarily work for children's services along the same lines and also in the area of training people to be more aware about this subject so they can address it with a proportionate response.
There have been a huge rise in the number of new child images circling on the internet, according to research. Why is that, and what's out there to help local authorities pick this up before they come into contact with children?
Well, the huge rise is new material. We understand a lot of it is self-taken, self-generated material. So it's young people, teenagers who are using portable devices, using webcams, to share with other people for many reasons. Risk-taking, for fun, they think it's cool to do so, and they take in material that's inappropriate or maybe even indecent of themselves and of their friends. Unfortunately, when they release ownership of that, when it goes onto another space away from their device, it becomes accessible by anybody, and it actually could come back and cause them issues in the future. In terms of that as an issue, it's clearly primarily an education one, but to detect that sort of behaviour, which needs to be addressed and ultimately will be maybe used negatively by people who've got a sexual interest in children, local authorities, not just local authorities, lots of other agencies need to put in place measures. What usually occurs is that they will leave it to their local IT people within their school or elsewhere. And in principle, that's reasonable. But how often is that material checked? Is it checked routinely? Is it just dip sampled? The key words are really early intervention. Can we get to the attitudes of these young people, or if it's a lot more serious, can we get to a situation where they're engaging with somebody else online through inappropriate text, inappropriate images, and they are putting themselves at real serious risk of meeting perhaps a predator online? Can we identify that and begin to address the issues as soon as possible?
So Colin, you're working with over 400 schools and local authorities across the UK to help with this issue. Why is it so important that there's a community-wide approach to online child protection, and how does eSafe Education help?
Well, it's important to have a community-wide approach, because otherwise what you'll find is that you won't get the engagement of the parents, which are crucial to make this happen. Previously, there is a belief that with parents they would want to keep away from necessarily what children are using in terms of new technology. There is a real passion out there for parents who are genuinely concerned about their children's safety and welfare, and what we're able to do is, by extending the technology that can be used in school to support parents at home, we can bring them some of the tools that can help them to keep engaged with their children at a time when really they're exploring new areas, new ideas, new things that are completely different to anything they've seen before. And it's just like it was when technology wasn't actually there. They still have to find their way. They just need a little bit of support.
So how does eSafe Education actually work?
Right, well, eSafe Education is a technology as well as a solution. And what I mean by that is that there's technology that sits on the computer to monitor activities, only reporting when there's some potential activities that might be inappropriate or against acceptable use. Also, threats that could be based upon imagery or upon mediums such as pen drive technologies that could bring in foreign matter that may well not be acceptable for minors. And what the system does then is report it back to a central solution, which is us, and then we as our people then monitor and review that data on an impartial basis and analyse it against other similar types of issues to see if it's a threat that needs to be escalated to either the school or in some serious cases to the authorities, but very rarely, but also maybe to advise the school of a potential trend or an issue developing that they need to really sort of get to grips with sooner than later.
So this provides consistency for local authorities?
I believe it does, and I think it's essential at a time when there is going to be a lot of turbulent change over the next year or two with all the government changes that are coming through to affect schools. And what e-safety monitoring can do with an independent methodology is provide consistency of reporting, information flow back through to the people on a timely basis. When you consider the pressures that people are going to be put upon in school in terms of resource, stretching their capabilities, covering for other people going sick. If a monitoring system is in place and people don't look at that system and act upon the information on a timely basis, you could be left in a really difficult situation where something gets missed down at school level, which has serious and long-standing effects with those further up the tree, but also with the actual individual child who may be affected. So ultimately, it's a two-tiered issue. It's one for affecting the safeguarding of children, but it's also protecting the liabilities associated with senior leadership.
You've talked about the fact that eSafe Education takes the responsibility of monitoring computers out of schools' hands. How has this come about, and why don't schools do this?
The idea of actually having the monitoring being handled by a professional organisation has come about because there are a lot of schools that have taken on technologies from a few years ago and they've deployed them in schools, and what they're finding now is that it's a heavy burden of responsibility to maintain looking at very long and protracted logs of information which effectively are meaningless to review with the children in some cases, because it can happen 3 or 4 weeks after the event in some cases, which is a huge amount of time, especially if it's something serious. So one of the benefits of having a monitored and managed service is that information is reviewed daily, and by that every single record of information is looked at independently and it's reviewed, and if there is a risk associated with it, it's escalated in due course. And most schools in worst case scenarios get to know within 24 hours, but in best case scenarios could know within the same hour, depending upon the seriousness of the issue that's arisen.
The government recently announced plans to integrate e-safety training and education into the curriculum in schools from next September. How important do you think it is that e-safety awareness is built into the curriculum and taught to young children?
I think it's critical. I mean, we forever talk about the children of a generation of, and we're almost adults now, of a generation that don't perhaps understand this technology as well as they should do. I think if it's going to come from the children, because they're better informed and better aware, I think a lot of that will actually creep upwards towards their parents and other adults. And I think the whole essence of equipping young people with the knowledge and skills to protect themselves in a new and emerging environment is just critical.
That was Terry Jones, Independent Child Protection Consultant for IPTAC, and Colin McKeown, Director at eSafe Education. For further information or to sign up to the regular podcast, please visit www.esafeeducation.co.uk.